Well, the national media wanted you to believe that Gonzaga was on upset watch against McNeese, but was there ever really a doubt?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to provide news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's post-game episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little bit further? Have you ever wondered what adventure could be just around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. The Gonzaga Bulldogs smash 12-seeded McNeese State, 30-win team out of the Southland Conference. Gonzaga didn't even make it look like a challenge in this one, advance into the round of 32. We're going to go all over this game. We're going to talk about the good things that we saw, mostly the good things we saw, the few not so good things we saw. We'll go over my keys to the game that we talked about on Thursday's episode of Locked On Zags. We're also going to look about whether this changes Gonzaga's ceiling. Are they now a more popular pick to be a Final Four team, an Elite Eight team, what that might look like? We're also going to go over some of the results we saw on Thursday. We are recording this before the end of the Kansas-Samford game. We will have a separate episode that will come out either on Friday or Saturday, getting you ready for whichever of those opponents Gonzaga is playing. But for right now, let's just enjoy the moment, because in a season, look, if I had told you in January or December that Joe Few was going to play significant minutes in a NCAA tournament game and get 2 shot attempts, I think a lot of the conversation at that time would have been the expectation that Gonzaga was getting blown out in an NCAA tournament game. But instead, Gonzaga as a single digit blows out another team. Joe Few gets minutes. Luka Krajnovic gets minutes. Jun-Suk Yeo gets minutes. The turnaround for this team from where they were prior to the Kentucky game to now. Yes, we had the loss to St. Mary's in the WCC championship game, but outside of that, what this team has been able to do has been absolutely incredible. And we talked, for those of you who listened to this week's episodes, shout out to you, shout out to the everyday listeners. Always appreciate having you on. But we talked a lot about how some of the strengths that McNeese has don't seem to line up very well against Gonzaga. And that is exactly how this thing played out. McNeese is good at trapping and good at forcing turnovers from opposing guards. Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman, they don't turn the ball over all that much. They had a few towards the end of the game, but Ryan Nembhard didn't. I think he had 1 turnover in the first half. Like, this team took great care of the basketball. McNeese tried to get to the free throw line, was unsuccessful at doing that. It was just an absolute masterclass performance from Mark Few and the Zags. They were up by 35 at one point. The final score, 86-65, looks a little bit closer than the actual result. Part of that was getting some walk-ons in towards the end of the game. We mentioned Joe Few played a few minutes. Colby Brooks played a few minutes as well. There's no net ranking to worry about. So if you're somebody who's like, oh, it was frustrating to watch them at the end of the game, who cares? I would much rather that than play Ryan Nembhard a full 40 minutes. Give him some rest. Who cares if the backups let McNeese back into the game a little bit? It just doesn't matter to me at all. The fact that this game was so far out of hand that they could do that, nothing but happiness on my end watching that happen. In fact, this was the largest halftime deficit for a 30-win team in NCAA history. Of every team that has made the NCAA tournament that had 30 wins in the regular season, this is the biggest deficit they've ever faced at halftime. The Zags were up 48-25 at half. We also came very close to seeing Joe Few score points, which would have been extremely fun. Getting into some of the good things that we saw in this game, Anton Watson almost had a triple-double. I was bummed that he didn't get it. Mark Few clearly brought him back into the game with the hopes of him getting it. He had 6 assists in the first 8 minutes of this game. He actually finished with 9 assists. That's where he fell short. He had 13 points, 13 rebounds. He came back in the game with 8 assists, got an assist on a Luka Krajnovic 3-pointer, and then got pulled before he got the opportunity to get that final one. I I wanted him. I wanted it for him. It would have been the second triple-double in Gonzaga basketball history, not tournament history, just history in general, after that Joel Ayayi triple-double a few years ago against Portland. But I understand the odds of leaving Anton Watson in to potentially get hurt or just more fatigued ahead of Saturday's game to try to chase a triple-double. Probably not worth it, although, man, the Spokane kid getting a triple-double in his final season in the NCAA tournament would have been a heck of a story. Still a fantastic game from him. Gonzaga absolutely dominated in terms of taking care of the basketball and facilitating the basketball. They had a 15-1 advantage in assists in the first half. 15-1. And one of the things we talked about leading into this game was how McNeese kind of lets teams get settled into their half-court offense, and they struggle to stop them from there. They actually gave up a huge percentage of the points they give up were on assists. That was a stat we talked about on Thursday's episode of Locked On Zags, and it turned out to be a huge advantage here for Gonzaga. They finished the game with 22 assists compared to 10 for McNeese. Other great things we saw, loved the performance of Dusty Stromer in this one. Dusty came off the bench early in this game because Ben Gregg picked up 2 quick fouls. We talked about Dusty coming into this game in his first NCAA tournament game. He struggled in his first road game against Washington. So did Braden Huff. What is Dusty going to look like, getting this opportunity on a big stage, etc.? He hits his first shot, a 3-pointer, all around just looked great defensively. He looked smooth offensively. He finished with 10 points, 3 assists. He was 3 of 5 from the field, including 2 of 3 from downtown. Really, really nice game from Dusty Stromer. He's played quietly, very excellent towards the end of the year. And I think that's a huge step for Gonzaga in terms of being the kind of team that can make an Elite Eight, can make a Final Four. You need to be able to have guys who can step in and keep your offense and keep your defense going when somebody gets in foul trouble. And to have that guy in Dusty is incredibly valuable for this team. And Braden Huff and Luka Krajnovic played well also. Huff finished with 7 points, not his most efficient night, but still had 7 points, 3 rebounds, had a block. Krajnovic had 7 points on 2 of 4 shooting. He got early minutes because Nolan Hickman got in foul trouble. And for Mark Few to trust Krajnovic to toss him in the game, that says a lot about the work that he has been doing behind the scenes to get better, to be able to be ready for this moment. Because Mark Few will not play you if he does not think you're ready. He won't do it. And for him to trust Luka unquestionably to put him in with 12 minutes left in the first half, huge sign of what the growth has been like for him on this Gonzaga team. Zags also 14 of 18 from the free throw line. You got to love doing that in March. This team has been really good from the free throw line in the last 2 months of the season. And to knock them down at this clip, they didn't really need it in this game as much because of the margin of victory, but always nice to be hitting those free throws and getting in a rhythm there as you get into the NCAA tournament. Zags also out-rebounded McNeese by 12, had 46 total rebounds in this game. And the defense was just so good. McNeese finished with 65 points. They had 25 in the first half. They didn't cross 40 until like the under 12, I think, something like that. They scored more towards the end of the game as Gonzaga kind of got into the reserves, but they stymied this pretty good offensive team throughout the entire game. McNeese shot just 33% from the field. They shot just 22% from 3. Their leading scorer, their best player, Shahada Wells, he was 6 of 25. 25 field goal attempts for Shahada Wells, only had 17 points. He was 1 of 8 from 3. Gonzaga played lockdown defense and got themselves a W because of it. The only bad things, McNeese did have 14 offensive rebounds. A lot of them came very early in the game. Gonzaga made some adjustments and kind of helped clean that up. Like we said, they ended up out-rebounding McNeese by 12, but they did give up a lot of second chance opportunities. Also a lot of and one opportunities. Part of that is just, if you're going to foul a guy when he's taking a shot, foul the guy. Like no soft fouls around the rim, giving up those and one buckets. They had 3 of them. I think they were all in the first 8 minutes of the game after that. Again, Gonzaga made some adjustments. The game got out of hand a little bit. McNeese started settling for more outside shots, and it worked in favor of Gonzaga. But one of those things that probably not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but we got to nitpick a little bit to find some negatives about a game where Gonzaga, a lot of people picked them to lose, and they had a 35-point lead at points. The other thing, 15 turnovers. Higher than you'd want. Again, McNeese is the top 10 team in the country at forcing turnovers. A lot of them were unforced turnovers, just a couple traveling calls, a couple things like that. I'm not really that concerned about this overall turnover number. A lot of them came at the very end of the game, like a huge chunk of them. Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman weren't particularly turnover prone. They ended up with more than they typically do by the end of the game, but I think Nembhard only had 1 in the first 30 or so minutes of this game. So like we said, most of them came when the game was well out of hand. Well, we're going to talk about the three-point shooting because we haven't even talked about the lights-out three-point shooting for Gonzaga and what it means for them, because this is a really good sign that this team truly is capable of being that fifth seed sleeper that goes to the Elite Eight, goes to the Final Four, gets themselves all the way back into the national championship game. We're going to talk about what all that means for the Zags. After a word from today's sponsor, Manscaped. This episode is brought to you by the spring cleaning champions at Manscaped. This season, make sure to groom your carpets and your drapes with the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Clear out that winter bush with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 and watch your confidence bloom like the springtime flowers. Embrace the season and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our special offer. Go to manscaped.com and use code LOCKEDON for 20% off plus free shipping. The fifth generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. Spring cleaning doesn't just apply to the nether regions either. Get the full grooming experience with Manscaped's signature Beard Hedger Pro Kit plus Handyman electric face shaver. Whether you're looking to craft your signature look or clean up that neckline, there are always the right tools for the job. Get 20% off and free shipping with code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. Nothing like a little spring cleaning. Folks, today's episode of Locked On Zags is also brought to you by Game Time. Do you need last-minute tickets? Are you trying to get out to Salt Lake City to see Gonzaga take on the winner of Kansas and Samford? If you're scrambling and you're trying to find those last tickets, no worries. Game Time has got you covered. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports and comedy, music, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time, where you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags. We're still getting through recapping that incredibly fun opening round game for the Zags in the NCAA Tournament against McNeese State. For the first time in school history, the Zags were a 5 seed, and they did not fall victim to the classic 12-5 upset, taking care of business in a major way. We're going to go through our 5 keys to the game that we talked about before the game. And we're also going to talk about whether this win raises the ceiling for Mark Few's team as they get further into the NCAA tournament. Key number 1 was about Graham Ike. We wanted him to stay on the floor and dominate on the block. Check and check. Graham Ike had 16 points and 10 rebounds. He was 6 of 6 from the field, 4 of 4 from the free throw line. If the ball left Graham Ike's hands, it went in the basket every single time. A perfect, efficient night for him. Graham struggled in the WCC tournament. He did not play up to his typical level in those games, and yet here he is coming into the NCAA tournament. His first game that wasn't a play-in game at Wyoming in 2022, he played in a play-in game, lost to Indiana. This is his first NCAA tournament game. Outside of that, perfect from the field. He also did not commit a single foul. On the first play of the game, Shahada Wells went straight at Graham Ike. He threw his hands up in the air, did not get the foul call for Wells. He actually made the shot. It was an impressive look. But after that, McNeese kind of gradually went away from trying to attack at him, trying to get to him. I think part of it was a game plan thing. They just made adjustments. They started settling for outside shots when the deficit got too big. And Graham never got in foul trouble whatsoever. And like we said, 16 and 10 from him. He keeps playing like that. This team's ceiling, sky high, sky high. Key number 2 was the turnover issue, not wanting to succumb to the fact that McNeese plays at pressure. They play a lot of traps. They do a lot of different defensive things, and they force a lot of turnovers. Ryan Nembhard had his first turnover at the under 12 in the first half, and his second turnover was like halfway into the second half. He finished with 3 turnovers, but he had 9 assists. I'm going to take that. 9 assists to 3 turnovers. I'm going to take that from Ryan Nembhard. A few more turnovers than you want, but that's pretty nitpicky to be discussing that. Nolan Hickman also had turnovers as well. He had 2 of them. He only had 1 assist, but again, you're not really asking him to distribute the basketball. Overall, just an excellent performance from Gonzaga's guards. They were a bit more subdued. Nembhard went 2 of 5 from 3. He didn't have a ton of points in this game, but he was the facilitator, quietly excellent on the defensive end of the floor as well. Nolan Hickman hit some really big shots early in this game, kind of didn't have as big of an impact in the second half of this game. He was also on the floor, out of the game a lot with foul trouble, but for the most part, Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman controlled this game. They controlled the tempo. They didn't succumb to the turnover issue that McNeese likes to cause for opposing teams, and it led to a victory. Key number 3, and the biggest storyline in this game, knocking down 3-point shots. Gonzaga was red hot in the first half. They shot 8 of 11 from 3 in the first half. I didn't pull the data, but there are many games this year where Gonzaga did not make 8 3-pointers. Many of them. They knocked down 8 in the first half. They had 3 threes in the first 2 minutes of this game. Nolan Hickman hit a 3 on Gonzaga's first offensive possession. Ryan Nembhard hit a 3 shortly after that. Nolan Hickman hit another 3 right after that, and this team was cruising. 3 of 3 from 3 to start out the game, and at that point, it kind of felt already like this thing might be over. McNeese stayed in it for a little longer after that, in part because of the and ones, but once Gonzaga was shooting like that, then Dusty Stromer comes in the game, replaces Ben Gregg, who picks up his second foul at about the 4-minute mark, 4 minutes into the game. Dusty Stromer hits his first 3. At that point, McNeese had switched to a 1-3-1 defense, trying to fluster Gonzaga, trying to remove Graham Ike from the game. They go to this 1-3-1. Gonzaga swings the ball over to Dusty. He hits a 3, and you could just see the light drain from Will Wade's eyes. They tried everything. They could not figure out how to stop Gonzaga. And look, when they're shooting 8 of 11 from 3, they are not stoppable. That's as simple as that. When this team is shooting like that, they are not beatable. Now, they shot 2 of 10 in the second half. So they came back to earth a little bit, still finished the game 10 of 21, still a phenomenal 3-point percentage for them. They weren't going to shoot 8 of 11 in both halves, so I'm not really concerned about that. Hickman finished with 3 made threes. Nembhard, Gregg, and Stromer each made a pair. Luka Krajnovic made a 3 as well, giving Anton Watson his 9th assist, almost getting him to that triple-double line. This 3-point shooting forced McNeese to do different things defensively. They couldn't play the style they wanted to play. You could tell that it was really the most impactful thing that took this game from Gonzaga continually having a lead, but McNeese staying within it, to Gonzaga running away from it at the end of the first half and then just coasting for the entire second half. I don't expect Gonzaga to have a lot of 8 of 11 halves for the rest of the season, but if they can shoot close to the 10 of 21 mark that they shot in this game, if they can make 9-10 threes, really put that pressure on opposing teams, they become that much more difficult to stop. And then key number 4 and 5 were to control the pace and to tune out the noise. I thought Gonzaga handled both these things well. McNeese's press really didn't do anything to stop Gonzaga. It really just didn't impact them. They usually threw the ball all the way up to half court to Ben Gregg or Anton Watson. They got into their offense from there. Just never seemed like it was a significant issue for the Zags. Tuning out the noise. Pro Gonzaga crowd in Salt Lake City. More of the concern was with the freshmen, the young guys who hadn't played at this level before. All of them had good games. Really just wasn't an issue at all. And now I want to talk about what is the ceiling for this team. We kind of talked about it throughout there, but we don't know the results of a lot of the games that are going to impact what Gonzaga's ceiling looks like. I said we will have another show either on Friday or on Saturday, getting ready for Gonzaga's opponent on Saturday, whether it's Kansas, whether it's Samford. We'll also at that point take a look at what the rest of that bracket looks like. Purdue, who they're going to, Purdue's going to take on Grambling. We know Utah State's going to take on TCU. What does that mean? We know in the Midwest region that Creighton has advanced. They beat Akron. We know that Oregon, the 11 seed, has advanced over South Carolina. Interestingly, that sets up Dana Altman, who spent 16, 17 years, something like that, coaching at the head coach of Creighton in the Missouri Valley. He is now the head coach at Oregon, getting to face his old school at Creighton. That's kind of a fun matchup there. We know Texas beat Colorado State. But really, Gonzaga's ceiling is going to be predicated by Graham Ike continuing to avoid foul trouble, the guards continuing to avoid turnovers, and the team continuing to shoot that well from 3. I also think a big part of this was the play of the youth, the play of Dusty Stromer, the play of Luka Krajnovic. Really the fact that Mark Few trusted Luka Krajnovic to put him on the floor. That is a really big sign to me. And in the first half in particular, the minutes that Luka played, he didn't do much. We didn't really do anything wrong. I'm not going to pretend I watched like a hawk every defensive possession. He may have made some mistakes on that end of the floor, but the stretch that he played was a good stretch of basketball for Gonzaga. And on offense, you saw him just kind of running the offense, making the right reads, making the right passes. He wasn't overly aggressive. He wasn't turning the ball over. In the second half, he let loose a little bit more, took that corner 3, took a couple other shots, drove to the basket, because at that point the game was more determined, and he was in less to as a patchwork lineup while Hickman was on foul trouble, and more of hey, we're just giving our starters a rest. So I think that allowed him to play a little bit more freely. But seeing him get that opportunity, seeing Dusty Stromer have one of the best games we've seen him play in a couple of months is a huge, huge positive sign for Gonzaga going forward. Like I said, we will get more into the nitty-gritty about the rest of Gonzaga's matchups in the Midwest region once we know what those matchups are going to look like. But what I want to do right now to close out the show is talk about the rest of the games we did see on Thursday that are already in the books and get you ready for a couple of the key games on Friday that might impact Gonzaga's seeding, but also just games to watch for Gonzaga fans. We're going to get to all of that. But first, this week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we are picking one team that stands out, a team that has pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level, and you bet we're talking about the Zags, because how else could we not talk about the Zags? They are this week's Nissan Rogue. They went rogue against the national media narrative. Everybody was pushing McNeese as the 12-5 trendy upset. Gonzaga went rogue, blasted McNeese, had a 30-point lead at points in this game, ultimately won by 21, coasting to a victory. They say win life, go rogue, and that's exactly what Gonzaga and Mark Few have done here. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, folks, closing out the show today, talking about some of the other key games we saw on Thursday. I don't know about you all, but I was up at 9:15 getting that Michigan State, Mississippi State game on, and I have been watching all day long. And when I'm done recording this, I'm going to watch some more, get you all ready for the Kansas-Samford matchup and what that might look like. I'm going to watch this Washington State-Drake game, which has not finished up as I'm recording this right now as well. But the other key results that are Zag-related, we'll start with the one that is the most Gonzaga-related. Arizona, Long Beach State. Tommy Lloyd, former Gonzaga assistant coach, taking on Dan Monson, former Gonzaga head coach, the man who actually hired Tommy Lloyd as a graduate assistant 20 plus years ago. And Arizona gets the win here, not surprising, a 2 seed over a 15 seed. They won quite handily. It was a bit closer in the first half than it should have been for Arizona, but they end up winning. Dan Monson, potentially the final game of his career for those who missed this story. He was fired last week before the start of the Big West tournament. All he did after getting fired and told, hey, you're still coaching, was to win the dang Big West tournament, take Long Beach State to their first NCAA tournament since 2012, their second in his tenure as the head coach. Really fun story, sad story for Dan, obviously. Hopefully he finds another job or retires or whatever he wants to do. Hopefully it ends positively for him. He had some really great quotes to the media about the situation, said he felt like he was in a Seinfeld episode, said it felt like the Twilight Zone. Mark Few and Tommy Lloyd in separate media press conferences have indicated how upset and frustrated they are for their friend and former boss about this whole situation. It's kind of a messy one, but Arizona advances as we expect. They will play Dayton, not Nevada, as Nevada was had a 17-point lead as the 10 seed over a 7 seed Dayton. It looked like that thing was in the bag. And Steve Alford, the head coach for Nevada, who is famous for blowing big leads in the NCAA tournament, he did it again. Dayton came all the way back, went on a 17-0 run, tied that thing up, ultimately came to a victory. It'll be 7 seed Dayton versus 2 seed Arizona in the West region in the round of 32. Also in the East region, BYU. Lots of talk about how they shouldn't have been a 6 seed. They should have been a 5 seed. That's where the committee wanted to put them. But because of their restrictions with the LDS Church and their inability to play on Sunday, they end up getting a 6 seed. Everybody thought, well, they gave them a gift by putting Duquesne, and not a very good 11-seeded team, in their region. None of it mattered. Duquesne, the Dukes, go out, pick up a victory here, send Mark Pope and BYU home early. Guess it didn't matter. Guess it was not a factor for them overall. My main curiosity at this point is whether we saw Mark Pope coach his last game at BYU, because he went to the University of Washington. He played basketball at UW. He also played basketball at Kentucky. We know UW's got a job opening. It's a possibility Kentucky's going to have a job opening. We'll get to that in a second. But Mark Pope was pretty unhappy that his team's seating was altered because of the rules at the university. It's not like he doesn't know the rules. You know, he wasn't caught off guard by that. But I think the frustration of being limited by something like that, compared to potentially getting offered a job at UW, which we don't know if he will, but he should, frankly, if UW should put a call in. If Kentucky comes calling, it's really going to be hard for him to turn that down. So just food for thought that BYU might have seen the last of Mark Pope as their head coach there. And I mentioned Kentucky because, folks, Kentucky loses to Oakland. This game happened at the same time as the Gonzaga McNeese game, so I think a lot of people might have missed it. I had the split screen up and just could not believe that Kentucky couldn't get their way back into this game. Jack Golke, the starting guard for Oakland, 32 points, 10 made threes. This dude was red hot. Kentucky came into this season 19-1 as a top 3 seed in first round games of the NCAA tournament. The only time they ever lost as a top 3 seed in the first round was when they were a 2 seed in 2022 and they lost to St. Peter's, the Peacocks, who of course went on that deep run to the Elite Eight. Now, the second time in a row in terms of being a top 3 seed, they were a 6 seed last year. Kentucky's done it again. They lose to an Oakland team that nobody really had on the radar, not a particularly good team from the advanced metrics, from KenPom data, anything like that. You got to start really wondering about John Calipari at this point. This will be a conversation for another time, an off-season conversation, but I got to start to wonder if Kentucky's seriously going to continue to put up with the lack of playoff success that the Wildcats have had in the last half decade under Calipari. It's been 10 years since they won a national championship. They haven't done a whole lot since then. It seems crazy to get rid of a coach who can recruit top recruiting classes year in and year out, but they're not winning. And at some point, I mean, Kentucky's a very proud organization. They're a very proud program. You don't put up with not winning. So I'm curious what's going to happen there. Definitely going to be one of the biggest storylines to watch this offseason. I already mentioned Nevada losing that game to Dayton. It's an unfortunate trend in the Mountain West. They are 1-3 in the NCAA tournament so far. They've never been good. Last year's San Diego State run of the national championship game was the only time that the Mountain West has really showed up well in the NCAA tournament. Leon Rice and Boise State, they lost to Colorado in a play-in game on Thursday. Folks, they are 0-10 in the NCAA tournament. They have the most NCAA tournament appearances without winning a single game. Meanwhile, Colorado State has the Mountain West only win. They blasted Virginia in that play-in game, but then they went and lost to Texas. They only scored 44 points against Texas, so they lose that game. Boise lost to Colorado in the play-in game. Nevada blew a 17-point lead, loses to Dayton. The Mountain West now 1-3 this tournament, and they are hoping to redeem themselves. 3 Mountain West teams in action on Friday. Utah State, the 8 seed, taking on a 9-seeded TCU. The winner of that game will play Purdue, who is taking on Grambling, and people are going to be tuned into that one more than usual as Purdue lost to a 16 seed last year in Fairleigh Dickinson. I expect Purdue to advance here. I also expect Utah State to advance, but I have been burned by Mountain West teams already this year. I had both Colorado State and Utah, or not Utah State. I had Colorado State and Nevada advancing. I had Nevada all the way in the Sweet 16. That is not going to happen. We'll see if Utah State can break the trend. San Diego State also plays in Spokane on Friday. They're taking on the Blazers of UAB, the auto bid winner of the AAC. And then New Mexico, 11 seed, they're taking on Clemson in the West region as well. Other game, Auburn taking on 13-seeded Yale. That game will be in Spokane. Yale obviously has played in Spokane this year at the McCarthy Athletic Center. They took on the Zags in Gonzaga's season opening game of the year. Now they get a chance to take on Auburn in the Spokane Arena. And then, of course, the game most Gonzaga fans are going to be keyed in on Friday, St. Mary's versus Grand Canyon, a 5-12. We did not want to see one of the WCC teams get upset by a 12 seed, but we might be a little bit more okay seeing it happen on the other end. 12 seeded Grand Canyon, the Lopes out of the whack. Bryce Drew's team really, really good this year. Very few losses in the non-conference, very few losses in conference play, taking on a St. Mary's team that outside of that loss to Gonzaga and Moraga has been red hot for the last few months of the season, undefeated in conference play until they played Gonzaga at the end of the year. We will see if the injury to Joshua Jefferson continues to impact them, how Mason Forbes can step up. Grand Canyon, really talented guard, Tyan Grant Foster, one of the best scorers in the entire country. Going to be a really intriguing matchup and one that I'm going to be glued to watching on Friday. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for today on this episode. But like I said, we will have another show discussing Gonzaga's upcoming opponent, whether it's Kansas or Samford. We'll talk about what the Zags need to do to win, and then we'll get that out for you before the game. We'll also have a game or an episode after the game as well. So we're not waiting until Monday for the next episode of Locked On Zags. We'll have at least a couple more between now and then. So stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell so you get notified on YouTube when new episodes come out. Join us on our Discord channel as well if you have not done so yet. It is free to join, and there is a link in the show notes. Thanks again for listening. And after a big-time win in the first round of the NCAA tournament, here's a big, hearty Go Zags.